Well, good morning. This is the Call Flow Radio Show, and thank you for joining us today. We do have a very special guest in the studio, and that is Senator Luther Cifers. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
It's very good to be with you, man. And so, Luther, how has everything been in your life? Of course, you've been very busy at General Assembly, so.
Indeed. Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, I got elected last year, and session was delayed a week because of the water problem they had in Richmond. And then my vote was certified about another weekend. So it was about 2 weeks after the normal start of session is when we got going last year. And it was a short session. So, Virginia works on a biennial budget, and you have these shorter sessions 1 year and then a longer session the next year. So it was very abbreviated last year. It was very high-paced, learning a lot. I literally knew nothing about the legislative process going into it. I mean, I knew at a high level, but it's very different when you're kind of in the tank,
in the trenches of it.
Yeah. So it was a lot to learn, and it's like every single day was like the next step of session, which is constantly changing. So you never really escaped the learning part until you get kind of to the end of the season. So I think it was very different this year, as I knew going into it kind of what to expect. I also had the benefit of the entire off season, from the end of session last year until the beginning of session this year, getting out into the district, visiting the different counties, listening to people, trying to understand their priorities and things that they were concerned about. And we brought legislation this year, which is something I carried 4 bills last year, but they were transferred from others.
Okay.
But this time we were able to kind of bring our own priorities. So we did take a couple of transfer bills as well. But for the most part, I carried, priorities that I was, that were important to me and that I felt like were important to our district, and kind of at least knew the paces. So it was very different this year, but still very much learning.
Yeah.
I think this is the kind of thing that you can figure out in a session, kind of how to go through the paces, but you could be there for 15, 20 years and still be learning.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's, every day is its own kind of like chapter, and you kind of learn as you go. Well, as far as like the legislation goes and all of that, I mean, what are some of the problems that you see, obviously, in rural communities that need some resolving?
Yeah, so I think in all of the communities statewide, I think what's front in mind front of mind for citizens is affordability.
Yeah.
We had a lot of inflation, kind of through and after COVID, and just everything's got more expensive. Everything from your groceries to your, the insurance for your house. Good gosh, if you didn't own a house before, 2018 or so, it really home ownership became very difficult. So a lot of the legislation that I bought was kind of related to affordability. And then in general, specific to my district is, we're a rural district. All of my counties have a significant rural component. Some of the counties are almost exclusively rural. Yeah. So it was kind of the, preserving local authority, making sure that decisions are being made locally instead of being pushed down from the state level. Some of the kind of more controversial issues right now, data centers and solar installations and that kind of stuff. Yeah. To me, it's really important that localities are making these decisions. I think they all have their potential benefits, but I just philosophically believe that decisions are best made close to home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, keeping it to that local level, leaves the power to the people versus, something bigger than the people, I feel like. So that is very important to kind of hold that, fast. Well, let me ask you, as far as like, affordability, I think that's obviously a great desire to like bring down the cost of housing, because like obviously when it's hard to buy a house, you can't really afford to live in that area. You kind of have to rent, and it just kind of creates like you're always like trying to find the cheapest like place to go. So that's great. But as far as like growth, I know the solar projects that are in the works, and like obviously the data centers are like job opportunities and growth for the community. But is there any other kind of like one of those like kind of growth options happening that you see that you would like to kind of like, like different ways for these, communities to grow, but also maintain their originality and their, the farmland, of course, and all of that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And that's one of the reasons I think it needs to be so individual.
Yeah.
So what data centers bring is they bring a lot of construction jobs. Mm-hmm. But once the data center has matured, once it's built and it's just operational, it's not that many jobs, but at the same time, it contributes substantially to the tax base. So a lot of the localities, for example, in Northern Virginia, you're hearing now that kind of data centers are the boogeyman. But the reality is, particularly in Northern Virginia, I mean, the doors have been wide open for data centers for a decade or so. They're pretty much saturated up there. And I mean, there are, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue that have resulted from that. So, there's a proposed data center here in Prince Edward County. There's different people on different sides of that. I think one thing that's important for the citizens to know, and let me be clear, this needs to be at the will of the citizens.
Yes, of course.
I'm 100% that's how I feel about this. But the citizens should understand the details. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And one of those details is that it is a substantial contribution to the tax base. So if your goal is to have lower property taxes, it might not be such a bad thing if it can be put in a place where it doesn't disturb anyone.
Exactly.
But at the same time, some people would rather, preserve that very rural component. And I know there's some opposition out there as well. I don't feel like my job or our job in government in general, and especially at the state level, is to tell people what's good for them. I think our job is to make sure that the facts are out there, and then let the local government process work out the rest.
Exactly, and make sure people are informed on those issues, because it's kind of hard to, obviously these are hot button issues and a lot of people are on different sides of the fence, but if you're informed on both all of the positives and the negatives, you can kind of maybe like take a step back and really kind of look at it unbiased.
Yeah, and that's something that I've really tried to do, is to try to look at these things through an untinted lens.
Yes, yeah.
Because a lot of them are very very polarized right now. A lot of things they get politicized, and then after that, you can't really have a normal conversation about them ever again. EVs is a perfect example. The government started pushing EVs, so now everybody's against EV, or a lot of people are against EVs. I drive a Tesla. Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, it's the best thing I've ever owned in my life. And in the particular model that I have, they're going to quit making it. And I'm like, what am I going to do next? Because I wouldn't want to go to another car,
Sure, yeah.
But it's on the basis, I didn't buy that car because the government said they thought EVs were a good idea. I'll be honest with you. I don't think they're that environmentally friendly, but the thing's got amazing performance, amazing ownership experience. So when you just look at it from that standpoint, I think the same is true for all of these other things. Solar installations, it's something that the rural counties are very sensitive about, almost universally have rejected them, at least wholesale. I mean, there are pockets, but I've tried to look at those very objectively. And the reality is we have some serious energy needs, and and I think the crisis that has already started and that's going to amplify in the next few years. It was created by the state government. But nonetheless, it's a reality, and it's sitting in our lap right now. And one of the interesting things about solar is that you can get it online very quickly. But I don't think that's a reason to force it down localities' necks. You know what I mean? So that's where the balance is. It's just making sure that people understand, hey, unfortunately, our electric rates are going to go up. And I don't mean what they already went up. I mean, they are going to go up substantially in the next few years. And one of the bills that I brought this year was to prolong the goals of the Clean Economy Act. A lot of people don't know what the Clean Economy Act is. It was passed in 2020. On the surface, it's about carbon neutrality, making all of our electricity with no carbon. But when you dig into it, it's really not. What it really is you can continue to make carbon or make electricity with carbon producing means, but if you don't meet these percentage targets, you have to the producers have to buy these green energy credits. So what really happens is they may, because of reliability, they may have to continue producing with carbon, especially now that our demand is up so high. But what happens is they have to now pay not only for the energy generation, but they also have to buy these carbon credits on this market, and that gets added to our electric bill. The way that our electricity in Virginia works, most of it, it's regulated monopolies. So you've got Appalachian Power and Dominion that are the two large regulated monopolies. They're guaranteed kind of a non-competition to a degree, and they're also guaranteed a certain profit margin. So a lot of people say, well, my electricity rates are going up. The energy producers of the boogeyman, well, they make the same profit regardless.
Yeah.
In fact, if the electricity rates are higher, their percentage on a larger number means actually making more money. The real culprit is the policy, unfortunately, is that we have essentially in Virginia made it illegal to make electricity in an affordable and reliable means without buying these energy credits. And then by 2045, they're supposed to retire all of the carbon producing. And that's not going to happen. I can promise you that's not going to happen, because even if we like double the rate of solar and wind, we will probably not be able to meet our energy demand, much less retire any existing production capacity. But there will be fines to be paid because they're being made with carbon. So this compounds into higher and higher rates. And because Virginia's economic activity over the last, Governor Youngkin did a really good job of spurring economic development in Virginia. With economic development comes energy needs.
Sure.
And especially when some of that economic development was energy intensive things like data centers. So now we're at a place where our demand is really high, but our ability to meet that demand has been severely restricted, and that's rising. That's kind of all triangulating towards rising costs, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, unfortunately. People don't like to hear that, but unfortunately, that's where we're headed. What I tried to do is push the dates out 20 years and just say, hey, if we looked at, nobody could have predicted in 2020 when this was passed that our energy consumption would be so high. So let's just kind of recalibrate our goals, not taking away the goal, but let's make it something that can be achieved without accumulating all these fees and putting those fees on our ratepayers. Unfortunately, that died in committee, but anyway, I think it would have been great policy. One of the committee members said it's probably the most common sense policy he's heard the whole session.
Wow.
But unfortunately, there's a lot of ideology around this as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's very understandable. I got to ask, Luther, as far as like this is your second go around, I guess. Like,
yes,
and
right.
So you were a little bit more, obviously in this business. It's not really business, but like in what you do, you're always like kind of learning and kind of going as you go along. Have you picked up on any like interesting things and maybe different policies that you feel like should be implemented?
Well, yeah, and I brought a bill for one of those too. So one thing that we do when there's legislation that has the opportunity to impact the state's budget. There's a thing we call a FIS. It's a fiscal impact statement, and basically it's a brief study that says if we pass this bill, this is likely what it's going to cost the state. And that all has to work into the preparation of the budget. If we're going to pass a bill that's got $80 million cost, well, we got to find $80 million to pay for it.
Exactly.
Whether that's in cutting somewhere else or in raising taxes or whatever it is, and it dawned on me that we make a lot of decisions in the General Assembly that are impacting people's wallets at home, but we do no such study for the people that we serve. So there is no information that I have as a legislator that says if you vote yes on this bill, it's going to cost or potentially save your constituents, the average household income in Virginia, it's going to cost or save them this much money. So to me, we've already got the kind of apparatus to do that. We've already got some methodology to do that. So why wouldn't we just go ahead and apply that to citizens as well in this era where affordability is so front of mind for so many people?
Exactly. Yeah, you would think that's something that is like one of the most biggest concerns, even more so than how much it's going to cost to implement such a bill is like how is it going to affect the people living here. Exactly.
Unfortunately, that one died in committee too. They said it was too expensive. I think the staffing for that was going to be between $1 million and $1.5 million a year, which if you look at that over 4 years, it would cost about the same amount as a referendum for gerrymandering, which we're getting ready to pay for. So, to me, like we've got to get our priorities on every side of the aisle in every level of government. We've got to get our priorities focused back on the people that we serve.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, we have went from a place where the people very much held their government accountable to a place where governments at all levels are holding the people accountable. And that's never how it was intended to be. I don't think it's sustainable. Yeah. And it's the only reason I ran, frankly, is to try to get the government out of our hair. I have visitors in my office sometimes, and I tell them I'm actually a citizen in disguise up here, wearing a suit and a tie. Like I'm not here to become part of the machine. I'm here to make sure that the kind of the voice of somebody like me, an average Joe, is represented up there.
Exactly. Yeah. The government is definitely there to serve the people, but not, inhibits in any way the people, and
Yeah, and even that phrase can mean different things. The Constitution is a document of negative liberties. It tells you what the government cannot do to you. The Constitution doesn't really say what the government must do for people. And it's a philosophical question, but for me, very often, the best thing that the government can do is kind of get out of our way. The more that, and I'll give you an anecdote. I've got Yak Attack here in town. Most people know about Yak Attack. Most people know the story. We started that business in a garage, grew it up, and now we've got about 70 employees over there, a world leader in the kayak fishing industry and well known throughout all of outdoor sports. But, I started that business in 2009, which was not that long ago.
No.
From that time until now, the revenue share, if you look at total business revenue in the United States, the revenue share for businesses that are smaller than $50 million has reduced by 23%.
Geez. That's a big impact.
It's a huge impact. So the more that we try to, the more the government tries to regulate things, what's happening is the burden for small business gets higher and higher and higher. And the companies that can deal with this stuff are the big companies. They're the big guys. And by the way, they're also the ones who've got lobbyists in Richmond and in Washington and everywhere else. So who's getting left behind, unfortunately, in a lot of these policies is kind of that middle layer, kind of the backbone of America. The people that are out there working hard and working overtime and trying to build businesses and all of that. The fat cats on Wall Street, they've got it made. If you're at the bottom of the economic scale, there's a lot of help for you, but that middle section of America, the people that just want to be left alone, that want to go out there and earn a living, they want to go out there and build a business, they want to be self-reliant, they want to produce more value to society than they consume, they're the ones taking the brunt of this. And this is something I don't get the opportunity to talk about often, so I'm going to ask you to entertain this for a minute.
Yeah, definitely.
The role of small business, in my mind, is to keep the big guys honest.
Yeah.
If you think about it, what happens is, a little successful company, and Yak Attack's a great example. It gets to a certain point and it becomes maybe too much for the founder to manage. And that's what Yak Attack became for me. I'm much more of a creator than a day-to-day manager. So, I sold a good portion of that business a few years ago to a private equity group. We were very fortunate to get great partners.
Yeah.
It's not always the case in private equity. We got great ones. But and we hired a CEO. So now Yak Attack's going to get, continue to scale and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But when most brands go through a life cycle where they get, and you see this in the tech sector too, they get bought up and rolled up, YouTube and Google, for example, or Instagram and Meta and Facebook, So they get rolled up into these bigger and bigger companies. And when they get that big, they have a lot of power.
Yes.
There's a great series on Netflix called The Men Who Built America that's about the old, kind of industrial revolution monopolies. It was a disaster for our country.
Henry Ford and all,
Well, it was the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and they were very, very powerful. So powerful they really controlled the government in a lot of aspects. But that's what happens is when businesses get above a certain size, they become not just instruments of service, but they could become instruments of control and power.
Yeah.
And what keeps them honest is the little guys. So, Yak Attack's a good example. One day, there's going to be this little gritty company that comes along that's going to come eat our lunch. Whether that's 10 years from now or 50 years from now, I don't know, but that's the natural life cycle, and that's a very healthy life cycle. when you don't have this fresh supply of small businesses coming in, which, by the way, they put downward pressure on price, they put upward pressure on service, they put upward pressure on innovation. When you don't have them, then the bigger companies get more and more powerful and more beholden to the shareholders and less beholden to their customers because, hey, you got nowhere else to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you want, whatever the thing is, I own all the companies, so you're coming to me.
You look at Disney, and obviously they own so much intellectual properties, and it's just one of those things where, something can grow and kind of consume and then create influence where it shouldn't have influence. And so that it is important to have small businesses be the defense of that, and stand up for that. And you kind of help serve small businesses here in Farmville. Am I right?
I mean, we try. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think it's so crucial that we keep having these small businesses coming. Yeah. And what happens is a lot of the regulation that gets passed, we just passed, well, I didn't vote for it, but we just passed a Paid Family Medical Leave Act. I think it's up to like 12 weeks. I mean, first off, it's a tax on every employee and every employer, but it's going to crush small businesses. And, these things are done with good intentions, but it's one of the reasons I think it's important for people to be in Richmond that have been there and done that, and to kind of know what it looks like from the other side. When I started Yak Attack in 2009. From 2009 to 2013, I worked another job because I didn't take a salary. I mean, that's how much on the razor edge I was. Now imagine that I had all these new burdens that we've developed, and
if you tried to start Yak Attack today, and
you couldn't do it.
You can do it.
Not with the resources that I had. You could not do it. Another interesting statistic: in 2000, about 23% of the people, 23% of the people could scrape together the $15,000 to $20,000 that it took to start a small business. Today, that's like $63,000, and it's single-digit percentage of people that can do it. So these are the kind of things that, we're doing a lot of things that may seem like good ideas on the surface, but have negative unintended consequences. And what I'm concerned about is the burden that's on small businesses to deal with all the regulations and not, at some point in time, be doing something wrong. Yeah. Because it's just so much now. And anyway, so people hear me from time to time talk about the, I'm pretty outspoken about things.
Sure, yeah.
But when I'm talking about bureaucracy, I'm not saying we've got bad people. That's not the point. The point is that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And whether it's the government getting too big, whether it's big business getting too big, anything that gets too big and doesn't have the proper checks and balances starts to be self-serving. And I think, unfortunately, we've crossed a place in the United States and in Virginia where we're no longer serving the constituency as much as we are managing them. And I believe the downstream consequences for this are catastrophic. And that's my calling. That's my job, is to do what I can to get that message out there, and then from inside the government, do what I can to dismantle it.
It's a very dire message, but it's very true at the same time. And it's hard to change that. Well, you kind of it's interesting that you said before, back in 2000, you needed $20,000 to start a new business. Now it's like 60, comparatively. And even then, your business is not a guaranteed success, so many small
absolutely.
Businesses fail every day. Most of them fail. So it's just one of those things where you almost want, because at the end of the day, the root of small business is just growing community. It's trying to support the community and what's there already. And so if small businesses can't enter the market, then you have a death basically in the community. The community is slowly the life of it is getting sucked away. So hugely important. What in your mind, obviously, I'm sure cutting down some of the taxes that business owners would have to pay, but what are some other things? Maybe somebody wants to start a small business, right? And they just scrape the cash together to do that. What are some things that you would, I don't want to say warn, because that kind of has a negative connotation, but maybe give them a heads up on getting into it. And then, because you were in those shoes, I think you're in an interesting position, and I do appreciate your experience, because you were started a small business, and now you're in the Senate, kind of seeing how the operation runs. So what are some good pointers somebody could hear and maybe keep in mind wanting to start a small business, and like what can government do to like help? And obviously there's some obvious ones there too, but like other maybe like, I don't know, like support programs for small businesses. And
so the thing that government can do is have some common sense. And I'll give you a good anecdote. I had an employee at Yakutak who was doing some design work on the side, and he wanted to legitimize his business. So he decided to apply for a business license. Now he's doing design work. He has a laptop that he puts in his lap, and he designs things. Okay, there's no equipment involved. There's no it's all done online. He sends the designs to people. No customers coming by. No power needs. No water needs.
He doesn't need a brick and mortar. Doesn't need. You can just do it.
The exact equivalent of someone working from home. Exactly. So he went in our town to apply for a business license, and they said, you're not zoned for the kind of business you want to do. So this is a case where you can use the law as a sledgehammer, or you can use it as in other words, if a, whether it's an elected official or someone in the bureaucracy, if they are faced with a decision like this and they say, how can I facilitate on behalf of my community? They're going to make one decision. If they say, is there a way that I can stop this by the law? Then they're going to make a different decision. And I think that level of discretion, or that ability to have good judgment and make those discretions in a way that, look, for a lot of people, this is heresy, but the law is not the ultimate. The citizen is the ultimate. And if the intent of the law was to prevent a certain situation, obviously the reason zoning laws are there is to make sure that you don't have somebody living in an apartment with foot traffic coming in and out to get their hair cut all day, or whatever it is, or using a bunch of water or resources or something that area is not designed for. Our country was not founded so that laws can control citizens. The only reason laws are supposed to exist really at all is for the common good, to make sure that what you're doing isn't somehow creating a problem for someone else. And we need laws, and we need regulations. We need all of that stuff. But we need to, when we apply them through the lens of what's good for our citizens, what's good for the people that elected us, the people that hired us, the people that we serve, then we make one set of decisions. When we view it as, there's a saying, beware of a trivial man with a little bit of authority. And I'm not applying that to this situation. I think somebody was doing a job the way they were trained to do it. And I get that. I really do. What I'm talking about is a philosophy in our country or in our state. It's not in a certain government. This is universal. It's nearly universal in our country now. But I think we do have the power as citizens. I think those of us that are elected, and including people that are hired into the government, we do have the ability to decide what lens we're going to use. And if we use the lens that favors our citizens, the people that we're supposed to serve, the people that are supposed to have freedom and liberty in their lives, that are supposed to live in the freest nation on God's green earth, we make one set of decisions. If we see those people as problems that we have to manage, we're going to make a different set of decisions.
One flourishes, life, and then the other is kind of like taking away and kind of like slowly crippling it.
But I think it's always done from a standpoint of, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I don't think we've got people that are like, oh, you know what, I want to make this difficult. Like that. I
would totally have to agree. Yeah, I think
that's why it's cultural.
Yes, it's tough, and I think there are things. I mean, like obviously, I don't think the government or Senate. I don't think people are trying to pass things that are intentionally trying to harm people, humans. No. So that just doesn't happen. It really is about care. It's just like how the approach is, and where it is coming from, and is it looking at all aspects? Because on one hand, it might be beneficial for an employee, and they can live a better life, and I think minimum wage, is one of the things, that is there to kind of help, somebody working a job, to be able to live from working that job, and that's it's an important thing to have, but also it takes away from somebody else, and it kind of hurts maybe the business owner more, and just
what it does is it does two things. I think the only reason that I'm not supportive. Well, the primary reason that I'm not supportive of these mandated minimum wage increases is because there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the jobs that pay minimum wage shouldn't be destinations.
I understand.
It should be a stepping stone on the way to somewhere. And there are places, where people get stuck there for longer than they would like to, or than longer than would be ideal. And I totally understand that. The problem is when government price controls never work. So what happens is you mandate a minimum wage. So first off, you kill a few businesses, but then the other thing is the price of commodities goes up. The price of things that are being produced, whether it's an actual physical thing or whether it's a service or whatever, those prices go up. Well, who pays those prices? The same people that got the minimum wage raised. And it's a vicious cycle. For whatever little bit of impact that might make in the short term that's beneficial, what would make a much larger impact that would be very long term is to create an environment that's conducive to prosperity. And so it's just that it's like rent controls. It's like, oh, we're going to put rent controls. Well, when you make it difficult for people to evict people that have not paid their rent for 2 or 3 months, what do you think landlords are going to do? By the way, a lot of the landlords are just people who saved their whole life to have one extra property. You know, in the case of corporate landlord, that's a whole nother deal. We shouldn't be letting trillionaire corporations buy up residential housing, in my opinion. But that's one of the few government intervention things I probably support. But what happens is now the risk of renting is higher, so therefore the rates get higher. I mean, this is the market's always going to balance itself. So the more we stick our fingers in it, the more problems we create. And when we're doing that at the same time that we're creating a less friendly environment to prosperity, I think we're kind of damaging it from two different sides.
I absolutely would agree. And like kind of what you were saying about big businesses buying up property to rent, it kind of becomes a monopoly again, like with the whole like Disney thing that we were just talking about, and just like other things too, like something can get too big and become damaging and then have influence where necessarily shouldn't. Influence should be held by the people and at a local level. I totally agree with like all of those things. I think that's very valuable.
And another thing really quick.
Sure, go for it.
I think it applies just as much in government or in kind of political philosophy as it does in business, but very, very often in business. The things that create short-term gains, we just talked about this, and I told you I just did another interview at Yak Attack. And the things that have very short term, that may have gains in the very short term, often come at the expense of long term success. So, a business, for example, that's strictly focused on the bottom line, you might be able to increase your profits for a year, but you're going to sell. Number one, you're going to sell your soul in the process. You're not going to have any kind of personal, emotional, spiritual satisfaction out of the job you're doing if all you care about is money. I don't care who you are. But secondly, because of the decisions that you're making are now driven by money instead of being driven by the people you serve, it's a matter of time before that comes back to bite you. I mean, these kind. So it's why. And when I talk about conservatism, I'm a conservative. I wear that on my sleeve. All it really means to me is that I believe there are time-tested principles that govern the human experience. And that if you deviate from those because you see an opportunity that you think you can put your finger on the scale and make something work, you almost invariably, almost universally create more problems than you solve. And we see it with every country in the world, that in every society that's ever existed, that gets bigger and bigger governments because the governments are trying more and more to control outcomes, and they're abandoning principles to do it. One of the reasons that our founders were so careful with the system they left in place and the checks and balances they left in place is because they knew that that the system had to self-govern in a way that it didn't ever compromise the principles.
In a way, it's a living thing, and it's constantly like changing a bit due to the needs of the people at the time. In a way, is that accurate?
Yes, but never decoupling from the principles.
Yeah,
and one of the core principles being, for me, is that the government, that the Constitution limits what the government can do to us. It doesn't insist what the government must do for us. I think you create a prosperous society, and the rising tide raises all ships. And I've never seen the government create prosperity.
I hear you out, and I'll be honest, just personal note, I don't even know if I'll keep this in here, but honestly, when I first met you and heard about some of your thoughts and opinions, you kind of strike me as a libertarian more than anything, but you do identify as a conservative, and I'm not talking about a full libertarian, because it's one of those spectrums where very extreme, where people want to just build in the streets and just do whatever they want, and then there's a more where you're coming from, which you is just like a loosening of the control, the hand of government on the people, so they can thrive and be themselves, best selves, and create prosperity, like you were just saying. So.
Yeah. So I would say I probably do have a libertarian streak,
Sure.
but I believe in, I like that Virginia's called the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
I really believe in things that are good for everyone. I just don't think that's best facilitated by the government.
Yeah.
I think there are cases where you need some kind of controls in place. For example, if we had no speed limits, or if we had no DUI laws, other
Sure,
people
yeah.
get harmed in
Oh,
that
yeah.
in that process. And if we allowed, we have no environmental controls. You can dump your oil into the into the creek when you change your oil in your car. I mean, obviously that's a really bad policy.
Yes,
To allow that kind of stuff would be terrible. But it's like, what is the least amount of government that we can apply to be sufficient? But also, as we're applying it, what is the lens through which we apply it? And I think that's the part that, when we feel like our job is to solve the problems for the people, what we're really doing is we're elevating ourselves to a place above the people we serve. And by the way, usually above the people who actually know what they're doing and actually know what they're talking about. One thing I can tell you is, for sure, as a legislator, we see about 3,000 bills a year. I don't see a single bill that I know more than somebody that I serve. You know what I mean? The people that I serve are the experts in life in these different areas, not me. It's why I rely so much on committee testimony, for example, when people come and testify, because I've got my own ideas, but I don't know how this works. And,
You got to really hear from the source.
And if I ever become so arrogant that I think I know how it works, I'll say this to my constituents: you need to elect somebody else.
Yeah. Because that at the end of the day, you lose sight. That's the very moment where you just stop and you think you got it. And then, I'm sure there's too many people in government, in senates, and that think that way, and that think they know what is best, without having to go around and talk to people who are living their situation, and they may think they know how to handle it, but you got to really hear from the people. I think, obviously, I think having a government that cares and is in, like we talked about before, the government's never going to pass, you guys are never going to pass a bill that's intentionally hurting people, but it's about how much care can you give without crippling everybody, and it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing, because obviously government has done great things, but at some points it does become a bit overbearing.
Yeah, and I'll say this. Here's
Sure.
the result of our system, okay? So we are leaving the next generation with the most debt in the history of the universe.
Yes.
Okay? And if you look at the price of gold, if you look at inflation, this is a direct result of having too much debt, too much currency printed, too much of all this. So we're not only leaving this generation with the most debt in the history of the universe, we're leaving them with a system that's dependent on continually increasing that debt in order to maintain the status quo. Okay? So that right there is an unsolvable equation. It will reach a point that there's a reckoning, a financial reckoning. And when it reaches that point, it's going to be catastrophic. Okay? Now add to that, this is where it gets really interesting. Add to that we're leaving this next generation with the most regulation in the history of the United States. So now what we're saying is you have to run the same mile that we ran with all of our baggage, our debt that we left you on your back. You're going to continue to accumulate more baggage while you're running it, but you're also going to do it with massive ankle weights on. Now, if we couldn't, I built my business when the regulations were more friendly. I built my first house when the regulations were more friendly. We all built our, the boomers and the Gen Xers, we all built whatever nest eggs we have in a less regulated environment, in an environment in which there was less debt on us. We're suddenly very virtuous about everything, the environment, the paid family medical leave, whatever you choose your benevolent oppression, I'll call it. We're very virtuous on these things now, but we're doing it on our kids' dimes.
Yeah.
And they don't really have a voice in the process. And I'm telling you right now, if you look out there at the movement that's happening with our youth, It's like 18 to 21-year-old young men right now, I think, are the most conservative demographic in the country, more than their grandfathers. This has never happened before, because they're seeing that. They're like, you guys are leaving us with your your debt, your burden, everything for the world that, you basically bought on our backs. But then on top of that, you're going to tie our hands with, everything. It's an impossible situation for the next generation. And I don't say that to be pessimistic. I say that to say we have an opportunity to undo it. But it's not going to happen if we're looking to the government for solutions. We got to look to the people for solutions. And if I were to tell you the solution for the people is they need to elect government, they need to elect people to government that want to put themselves out of business and to have less control over their lives.
Do you ever hear from and I apologize, this interview is like going longer than expected, but I'm enjoying this. Do you have to be anywhere? Okay. I'll try to keep this like another like 10 minutes or so. But like, do you ever hear from maybe failed businesses? Do they come in and do you ever hear about like people coming in to test? Do you call it testify? Like when they come in
committee?
And yes, and like maybe have the battle scars of like, this is how my life is now. And like, how is that handled in Senate?
Gosh, that is such an interesting question.
Yeah.
I've never been asked that question before. And to be honest with you, I've never contemplated that question before. How often do I hear from people whose businesses have failed? What I would say is what I usually hear from is people who have had failure, but who kept going and eventually found success, or people who feel like they can't get started.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reason for that is people don't like when you put it all on the line, your house, your livelihood, potentially lots of debt. It's probably not something you want to talk about very much after. Yeah. We know most small businesses fail. I mean, statistically, that's been the case for a long time. But the battle stories that people are usually willing to share, I think, is either out of frustration that they can't get started. Those I hear more often, or the people who have made it, but who look back and reflect on some of the failures that it took to help them get there. Yeah. I think we're in an environment now where where you don't have as many. People starting the kind of businesses that I would be, that they would be talking to me about. People who start like manufacturing related, that kind of stuff. That's usually the people that come talk to me about business. But that's a really interesting question.
It doesn't even have to apply to businesses. I just think like individually, maybe business is an easy one to kind of point to, and it because like people understand it, get it. But like how the just government has failed them in some capacity, and like when that does happen, if it does happen, somebody comes up and has a situation of, whether it's a certain policy that's in place that's affected them negatively, and now they are dealing with the repercussions. How is that handled? I don't know. I'm not expecting you to point to a specific example, but like, is that like a discussion? Does that lead to a discussion between people in government to like actually help resolve, or is it more just like what we were talking about earlier with like some people have like ideas on how to fix things, and then they go ahead and they don't really care to hear from people living it, those situations. They just roll on by with the grand plan of
another very insightful question. So the answer is yes, and the one that I hear the most is from younger people who are frustrated that they have got great grades in school, went out and went to university, got their degree, got good jobs, good paying jobs, and still can't afford a home. Yeah. That's the one that I hear that one on a very regular basis. But what's interesting is I think we have culturally come to the point, and this is why I like to talk about this stuff, because I would like to provoke people to think about it differently, that it's the job of the government to fix it. Well, the government, as Ronald Reagan said, the government isn't the answer to the problem; it's the source of the problem. And I think a lot of times it's like, well, we need help here, we need something to happen here, we need some money here, we need. But in reality, what we've done is we've thrown we have laminated this layer of legislation, laws and money, and laws and money, and now it's so thick and it's so heavy, we don't even know what the original problems look like anymore. So unfortunately, a lot of that comes with a desire for more of what created the problem to begin with.
It gave me a funny visual. It's like when you, let's say you bought a house or whatever, and it's like an older house, and then you're like, I wonder what's underneath this carpet, and you start pulling, you just see the layers of vinyl, and with that, the way the government is set up, it's just like you're just peeling back like years and years of, it's very interesting. Ronald Reagan said that government is the cause of the problem or something like that.
That's not a direct quote, but
essentially,
it's not the answer.
The essence.
It's the cause. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'll give you another anecdote. I mean, I have a special care for people being able to afford homes, and the reason is because I know that like I said, it was a razor edge for many years, just on the teetering edge of failure to get Yak Attack established.
Sure.
And one of the things I had to lean on was home equity. I had a home ownership. And if I hadn't had a home ownership, I believe everything would have turned out very differently. And I've already told you how important I think new small business creation is to the future of our country. And I don't think you have healthy, robust new small business creation without having healthy, robust home ownership. So I have been working for some time on how can we, in the construction process, how can we borrow things that we've learned in manufacturing? How can we borrow some techniques, apply that to home building, and get some of the cost out? I have discovered some things that are substantial. So I bought a piece of land here in town, and I'll just be transparent. I paid $360,000 for the land, with the goal of splitting that up into 10 lots. $36,000 a lot. By the time you get some infrastructure in there, we could keep the lot cost below $50,000. And what I think is that we could put a little 1,500 to 1,700 square foot home on there and sell them for around $250,000.
Affordable housing.
Affordable, but not subsidized. So first off, this was pretty expensive land.
Yes.
The stormwater management costs almost twice as much as the land did. So now if we were to divide that into 10 lots, by the time we got through all the stormwater management, it would be $125,000 to $150,000 per lot in just land, strictly driven by regulation. And it's like, oh, but if you don't do it, well, come on. There's a place where it makes sense. You're building giant neighborhoods, but there's another place where it's just completely impractical. And that's where I think, again, we've gotten very virtuous on our children's dimes. And we didn't have those regulations when we built our homes.
Yeah. You're at a roadblock. You can't really proceed into.
Yeah, there's no canvas. There's nowhere to build. In order to get, if you carve out 2 acres on a state road, or 6 acres, whatever it's zoned for, you put a well and septic tank, you have very low infrastructure requirements. But if you try to build a neighborhood, it is just so draconian now, the hoops you have to go through environmental and all of this stuff, and the state requirements on roads and all this stuff. And granted, is it more ideal if we do everything the perfect way, the most expensive way? Yes, it's more ideal, unless you're the person buying the home.
Exactly.
And I think when we get to the point that we are prioritizing the quote unquote needs or priorities of our governments, whether it's local, state, or federal, instead of the needs and the priorities of the citizens that we're supposed to serve, you kind of get the situation that we have now.
Yeah, that's tough. Oh, so I mean, I hope you don't mind me asking, what are you going to do with the land then? I guess just have it.
I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe tough. build 3 or 4 large, expensive houses there because there's nothing else. You know what I mean?
Sure,
so it's like, builders don't want to build $250,000 homes. No, it's not that. Yeah, there's nowhere to build them. Yeah. There's nowhere to build them. The land development cost, and this has happened in the last 10 or 15 years. It's gotten so much worse. So, could we solve that problem in some ways? Maybe. Is this a place that maybe government can get a little bit involved? Maybe. If the government is demanding the infrastructure because that's what we need, maybe there's a way that we can, have some of that infrastructure paid for by the entities that are going to assume ownership of the infrastructure anyway. Yeah. For example, the town's going to end up with the water and sewer. The state's going to end up with the roads. Maybe there's some public-private partnership ways that we could go about that. That would eventually get paid for with property taxes. I don't know. But to me, a lot of these things, it's like, you're familiar with the 80-20 rule?
I've heard of it.
You get 80% of the result with 20% of the effort. I think it's called the Pareto principle. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get 80% of the result. And when you do that, when you try to get 80% of the result, you need a very, very high level of effort, which means a very, very high level of cost. I'm sorry, we're trying to exceed 80%. So to go from 80 to 90, your effort might go, or your cost might go from 20% to 50 or 60%. And we're in that. We've crossed the sweet spot some time ago, and we're very much in the area of the law of diminishing returns and a lot of this regulation. And people say, "Oh, you don't want any regulation. You just want." No, actually, we need regulation. It's just, it should have some common sense. And that's why it's so important to me that as a legislator and as everybody at all level of government, elected or otherwise, that we look through the lens of what's best for the constituent, not if we think that the prime, our number one priority is to see how we can interpret the letter of the law in a way to inhibit progress, we're really not doing our jobs.
Yeah, I can tell, Luther, that you live this and you breathe it as a citizen, that you care about these issues, and that they're most likely, in the back of your head most hours of any day. I could just tell, this because it's important. It's basically, you're talking about life and making things thrive. So it's understandable. And obviously, everybody, we appreciate, what you do in the Senate.
Thank you.
But I guess I'll, wrap things up here with, as far as the people. I feel like some people aren't informed, and it's not even, some people aren't informed, and that's their own doing. They don't really care, and they're kind of blind to issues. And maybe it's a belief, a self-belief that things are always going to be this way, and they're kind of stuck. You have another group of people who are maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum, who are overly informed, not overly informed, you can't be, but you know what I mean, very informed, keeping up. And then just that middle group, that's just kind of they hear little bits and pieces, but they don't know what to do. They don't. So as somebody who's in, the Senate, I'm sure you want to see people discuss these same issues. So, and really hammer these issues home. So and figure out a plan, because it's got to come from the people, not necessarily the government. And I'm not saying the government can never come up with a plan for an issue and have it go right, because I'm sure, there's been things that have been passed that have worked out and I think have been beneficial. I'm just saying it's not always that way. So how can people, what do you want to see from people living in these areas, your district?
Another very good question is to understand the difference between a citizen and a subject, and make sure that they're being citizens. I was the person that just wanted to be left alone. Let me go, build my business, raise my family, do my thing. I have always, my entire life, contributed to society through whatever I was doing, whether I was benefiting the employers that I've worked for, or through my businesses benefiting the local community or creating jobs or whatever. I don't need anyone to tell me to do that. I don't need anyone to tell me to care about more than just making money or whatever it is. But I just wanted to be left alone. And what happened is, while many of us, just regular hardworking Americans that were out there just trying to live our lives, there's another group that is very politically involved, that has a different vision for our country, and whether we like it or not, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but I don't remember who said it, but it's basically that democracy belongs to those who participate. So what I would like to see from people is to realize that, number one, you are not subjects of this government. The government is accountable to you, not the other way around. Don't ever forget that. And as citizens, you have not only a right, but a duty to be involved. That my biggest regret from the first, whatever it is, 49 years of my life before running for office, is that I wasn't more involved. I never attended a committee meeting to testify on an issue. I never kept up with the bills that were going through General Assembly. I just, like everybody else, waited till July to see what new laws were coming our way. I just, and for a lot of people that are out there working hard and that don't have a lot of time left in the day, it's frustrating. They feel like, why should I have to do that? Isn't the Constitution supposed to protect me from my government? But the answer is it doesn't matter whether it's supposed to or not. It hasn't done a very good job of it. So we are going to have the country, the county, the state, the whatever it is, we're going to have the one that we create as citizens. And if you believe that we're headed in the right direction and you want to just kind of go do your thing, go for it. But if you think there's things that should be different and you're not involved, if you want to know who's responsible for that, and these are tough words and a lot of people don't like to hear them, you have to start in the mirror. And I had to start in the mirror. And I will admit that. And whether, it remains to be seen for me, like how, if I'm long for politics, this is not, it's not a life goal of mine. It's not something that I can say I have a tremendous amount of ambition around other than what I'd like to accomplish. But I'll tell you this, I'll never not be involved again. I'll never not be involved again. The people have to be involved.
Yeah.
And study the founding. There was brilliance in the way this country was founded. There's brilliance in the way our government works. Study that, understand it, and then apply it when you vote.
Yeah. Well, Senator Cifers, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yes,
we
sir.
really
Thank
appreciate it. And thanks for coming in and informing us on the happenings. Greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.